Real people, real opinions.
Real Talk Radio. The multi-award winning Niall Boylan Show.
Ireland's classic hits.
The first thing I want to get to is the budget. Now, the budget is coming very soon, and the tax strategy papers were released yesterday. These are papers drawn up by senior civil servants, and they give a kind of broad outline of the options for the government for the budget. And as you know, around this time of the year, they'll start to fly a few kites. In other words, they leak on purpose a few bits and pieces to see how it goes down with the general public. And of course, Budget 2024 will be published in October. Now, we heard in the news today that many groups have opinions about what the next budget should be and should not include. Social Justice Ireland is an independent think tank and a justice advocacy organisation, and they are looking for permanent changes to the tax system rather than one-off payments we saw last year. They say these one-off payments did not help the marginalised. One group, or should I say one change the group is seeking, is a €25 a week increase in the core social welfare rates. However, this is estimated to cost the state more than €1.7 billion next year. So is it really realistic? CEO of Social Justice Ireland, Sean Healy, joins me now on the line. Sean, good afternoon, or good evening to you. I do apologise. Good evening to you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, Sean. Sorry.
Oh, good. I could hear you there all the time. No problem.
No, it's late at night. The eyes are starting to close, Sean. I put the wrong fader up. I put the wrong
I
fader
can
up.
understand that. No problem at all.
Sean, I mean, look, there is no doubt that we need to do more for people, particularly when we're going through, I suppose, the crisis we're currently, the cost of living crisis that we're going through.
Yep.
So the gap between the kind of wealthy and the unwealthy or the poor is getting wider and wider. And people who are kind of in the middle ground are now in the poverty trap, like many others. So we have to do something for people. But is it realistic to expect, 6% of the population, I think, is the unemployment rate at the moment, for example. And I know there are other benefits you're talking about too, social welfare benefits. But is it realistic to spend that much money, on a small amount when we could do a lot more with that 1.7 billion?
Well, basically, it depends on what kind of society we want. At the end of the day, what we're looking at is a situation where Ireland is doing extremely well in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
The economy is flying. Unemployment is down at 3.8%, the lowest it's ever been. That's really full employment because there's always people on transit from one job to another, or they've just finished their time in school or in college or whatever, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So they're like 3.8% unemployment.
Yeah, if you want a job, in other words, if you want a job, there's a job out there for you somewhere.
That's right, on one condition that you have the skills to do it. That's the one, because the actual skills required to do jobs are rising all the time, and not everybody has those skills. But anyway, the bottom line, though, is that there's still 671,000 people at risk of poverty in Ireland. And that's not us saying that now. That's the government's own statistical office, the CSO, as they call it, the Central Statistics Office. And that's their most recent number. And of those 671,000, 188,000 are children. And there's been a very substantial rise as well in the last year or two among the people who are older. That the poverty is rising there as well. So, all we're suggesting, it might sound crazy, but in actual fact,
it doesn't sound crazy. I'm wondering, do we have the budget for it? But go on, it doesn't sound crazy.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, what we're trying to do is just basically say, not to make any big dent in it, but just to keep the situation the way it is. In other words, to keep people able to purchase the same next year as they're purchasing this year. Like, if you look at what happens in the last budget, you see the problem in action, really, of why the government got it wrong. What they did was they gave tax cuts to the better off, which were permanent changes. And, okay, people might feel that they should have got more, but they have whatever they got, they kept and they continue to keep. On the other side, the people who are depending on core welfare rates, they're basically stuck because they didn't get the same. They didn't get what was required just to keep them where they were. That would have required an increase in the last budget of €20 a week. They got 12, and then they got a few one-off payments. But the problem with the one-off payments, they're very welcome when they actually arrive first. But obviously, when they're gone, they're gone.
Oh yeah, they go with a bill or something, electricity bill or something. Yeah,
exactly, and that's what they're meant to mean or meant to get, and whatever. And the result then is that those people are worse off today than they were 12 months ago. The money they get today doesn't purchase as much as it did as their money that they had 12 months ago.
Would it not be better? Here's the thing, okay? And I do feel really, really sorry for people who are marginalised or people who are on the verge of poverty. And there are many people, by the way, who we don't even realise are on the verge of poverty. People who are working, who have a mortgage or childcare costs and all that kind of
about 130,000 people actually have a job, but they're still living in households of poverty.
The idea that people, and it always blows my mind, I'm lucky in a sense that I have a job that pays me reasonably well. I'm not working in RTE by any stretch of the imagination, but it pays me reasonably well. But it always, it shocks me that people can work a 40-hour week on minimum wage and survive in this country, because I know how expensive it is to live, and I know, like anybody else, even though I'm on a decent wage, I'm skint at the end of the month. So would it not answer us better to tackle that problem, people's salary? In other words, the cost of living has gone up. Not only the government say 9-point-something%, it's more than that. Realistically, for people, the cost of living in the last year and a half has probably gone up by about 25% when you take into consideration the cost of diesel and bills and electricity and everything else. So, and their mortgage has gone up too. Would it not answer us better to try and give people more money? Because that money goes back into the economy anyway. We spend it, and the government get VAT on it anyway.
And it gets spent locally as well, so it's good, yeah. And I'd be all in favour of that. And one of the things that we have been pushing for some time is that the minimum wage should be replaced by a living wage. A living wage would be a wage that would be would get you a decent standard of living. Nothing exceptional, but at least to get the minimum. And that actually is now more or less accepted by government. The government has said they will bring in a living wage. They're talking.
Many companies already do. I mean, I know the likes of Aldi and Lidl, and all those other companies.
They do absolutely. In fairness, and but even with the government saying we'll bring in legislation that that the minimum wage will have to be the living wage, and that the living wage would be 60 or maybe 66%. The government's saying 60%.
Whatever happened to? Sorry for interrupting you, but I remember when I was a young man and I was working in a record shop back in 1981 or 82. If I remember rightly, it was called the National Wage Agreement. At the time. You may remember that, Sean. I don't know how old you are, if you're as old as I am. But
I'm as old as you are.
Okay, so you remember the National Wage Agreement, which meant that everybody's wages went up with the cost of living.
That's right, yeah.
Whatever, I thought is that not a good idea? And why doesn't that happen anymore?
Well, what actually happened was with the crash in 2008, that sort of process of having national wage agreements all the time, it crashed. It crashed for a while as well. But actually, it's coming back, I think. And at the moment, there is a national wage agreement that is going to be negotiated, I think, later this year, that the trade unions and the employers and the government will negotiate a new national agreement on wages now just. And I suppose what we would be arguing for is that other things are required as well that we need to negotiate, and it needs more than employers and trade unions and the government doing it. It needs organisations, the community and voluntary sector and so on as well. Why? Because if you were sort of looking at what you need to live, have a good life, and to at least to have the basics, etc. You're looking also not just at the job, but also at the services like education, healthcare, public transport, those kinds of things, and of course housing, which is the most obvious thing that we have seen. We need a situation in which the supply of housing is sufficient to meet the demand. At the moment, that's not the case, and the result is the price of housing has gone through the sky and out through the roof. And as a result, like an awful lot of people who would have expected to be able to buy a house once, when they're
renting, of course, yeah,
or they're renting, and a lot of people can't afford to rent because there's a huge amount of government money, somewhere in the region of $3 billion a year, that's actually going in to support people to rent.
I believe the figure is 30 million for Dublin alone per month, which is a shocking amount of money going into private landlords, of course.
Exactly, and it's the housing assistance payment that they
That's
have.
right.
And I mean, the fact that it's there is good because otherwise people wouldn't be able to do it at all.
Well,
but they'd be far better off. They'd be far better off if they built social housing and then be able to give that to people. For
That's the
money
magic
that they can
wand,
actually
Sean, isn't it? Because I mean,
Precisely.
look, I mean, every government party now coming up close to the election next year is going to be promising. Well, we assume it's next year is going to be promising. We'll build so many houses. So Sinn Féin, we're talking about 120,000 houses. I don't know where they're going to get all the people to build these houses. That's the problem we have, is nobody to build them.
But we did. But Niall, we did that like when we were a poor country. Jeez, we're not a poor country.
I know.
today,
Sean
like.
Lamass did it back in the 1960s.
Thank you. Exactly. You remember this.
I do.
And like the situation was that even though we were a poor country, we put a serious bit of effort into things that were essential, like housing. Now, they weren't necessarily the mansions and all that sort of stuff, but they were good housing that we had, and everybody had access to housing.
Oh, they're still
And the
standing.
idea that-
My mother and father's house, I mean,
Precisely.
they passed on a long time now, but the house is still there and it's still
Precisely,
standing.
that's the story. That's the exact story. And I think what we're talking about here, is that you need a number of different things. Like you need a good economy, a vibrant economy, but you also need services to support that economy. Because if you don't have the healthcare service, the education to train up the labour force, health to support it, housing for their accommodation, public transport to get them around, and so on, you're not going to have a vibrant economy. And not just that. Then you have to look at that. That's basically, there's a lot of services to be paid for and so on. You've got to have a decent tax system, then a fair tax system.
Now, when you talk about
when
you talk about, Sean, when you talk about changing the tax system, there was a suggestion many years ago by Michael O'Leary, and I remember Lucinda Creighton when she was with Renew. Do you remember that party that didn't last very long? She had an idea, and so did Michael O'Leary, which is a very similar idea, of reforming the tax system, whereby we abolish tax credits, we abolish the tax-free allowance system, so to speak, and everybody just paid 10% of their salary. It's a very simple system. It's similar to what they're doing in the United Kingdom with the universal social credit. It's a kind of similar situation. Now, it's not exactly what they were talking about, but I think that would be a very fair and equitable idea, that if everybody, so in other words, there'll be no dodging tax anymore. There'll be no, I'm talking about legally dodging it. If everybody, including businesses, everybody had to pay 10% of everything they earned.
I suspect that wouldn't be big enough to pay for the society that we actually have, but I certainly would believe that we need to change the tax system, that we need to upgrade the tax system. And one of the things I'd be in favour of in the long run would be the introduction of a universal basic income with universal basic services, putting that together. So the idea would be that instead of your tax credits, and instead of your welfare payments and so on, everybody gets a basic payment from the state, okay? And after that, there's no, like, you pay standard tax on everything that you earn. You get this payment, but then everything you earn,
over and
pay
above
a certain
that,
amount on it.
But that's what they're doing.
Not even over and above that. You get the money no matter whether you're unemployed or not. You get the same money.
But
okay?
isn't that what they do in the United Kingdom? They've replaced the social welfare system with a universal social credit system, which is
not
less
really.
Well, isn't it? It's kind of like a single person is entitled to say $500 a month or whatever it is up north. And once you go past that $500 a month, they then reduce your payment by, say, 60 cents for every pound that you earn. It's done, in a kind of incremental manner, which
that's right.
I think is a very fair system.
I think that's not the best thing to do. A better idea, I suggest, just to think about it, is a universal basic income, which is basically that you pay everybody the level, we'll say, of it, for talk's sake, just to say the level of the core welfare payment. Now, and they get that whether they have a job or don't have a job, or whether they're retired or whatever. They might need a little bit more if they were retired. They get less if they're children, but obviously to go to the parents or the carers, the parents or whatever. But the bottom line in it is that everything that you earn then is taxed at a standard rate, okay?
Yeah.
Whatever that rate would be. And the bottom line in that is that's a much fairer system, which is more appropriate to the modern world's economy. Because I think we're still working with outdated systems in terms of how we pay people.
Couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, the system was built for the Industrial Revolution. I mean, it's
Precisely.
It's a dreadful system, and it's open, by the way, to those who are making more money, avoiding paying more tax and paying less tax. The higher earners in this country actually pay less tax than some of the people who are earning middle income. So, I mean,
certainly as a percentage, that's true. Absolutely.
Okay, and the other thing as well that you're calling for as well is £290.30 single rate universal state social welfare pension and an increase in the living alone allowance by £5 a week. 290, I think that's a fair price. I think that's a fair payment to give to somebody who has worked hard in this country all of their life.
That's right. And at the moment, you see, there's a lot of people don't get the full pension. They get a part of the pension because they didn't pay enough. Like maybe they were off, particularly women who
it's completely
were
unfair.
Who were caring and something, those kinds of things, and therefore they don't have access to it. It shouldn't matter. It should be absolutely everybody gets it. If you've lived into a retirement age, then I think you should get that. And that was
I completely agree with you. I don't agree with the idea of a contributory and non-contributory pension. I just don't agree with it at all. I think everybody should get the same amount of money, unless you have a private pension. That's your own business.
And that's a separate issue.
Absolutely. Now, you also mentioned child benefit as well, and here's a sticky, thorny subject in this country, of course, because our constitution protects all the children, so we can never abolish child benefit. But I suppose the British system, again, to look at the British system, if you if you have a family income of over 50,000 sterling, or it's actually 50,001, I think, sterling in the UK, you then have to start paying tax on child benefit. Is that a system that you'd be thinking of, or a means-tested system, or that's essentially means-tested?
The best way I think we should look at is there's two ways of kind of doing it. We can target poor children in poor households, okay? And at the moment we pay them a certain amount of money for each child, not a huge amount, but a certain amount. Now we can increase that.
It's in fairness, Sean, it's a generous amount by European standards.
I'm not so sure that it's that generous, but at least it's there. And but the problem is this: if you increase it, it becomes more difficult for that household to get one of them to get a job and to make it pay better than if they were on the dole. Like there was a time 20 plus years ago when we used to have huge problems with unemployment traps and poverty traps and all sorts of stuff. We spent years getting rid of all of that stuff. And I think it's better if we're in the space today to, if we have money and we think we should be giving something for children, give it to child benefit, and then that means that payment will continue after the person gets the job. Their children will still get the child benefit, and therefore they don't lose out. So they don't have to be getting a huge income from their job to actually come off the dole. Now, in actual fact, we don't have a huge problem with that at the moment. No problem at all, really, because we've such a small unemployment number. But that's not going to stay that way forever.
No.
The economy goes in cycles, and that's the way that's going to go. So we would say on child benefit, it is important to deal with child poverty. Give €50 a month increase in child benefit. That's a
big increase, isn't it? Particularly with a family that might have 4 or 5 kids. You know, that's going to cost the state a lot of money.
It is, yeah, but at the same time, you see, overall, again, you're talking about a state. We haven't adjusted very well to the change, if you like, in our system, like that the country is doing so well compared to what it used to be. We're so used to low incomes and all of that sort of stuff that we actually think that what is basically a reasonable payment, we think it's very high. And as a result, I think we kind of get ourselves caught up in all sorts of things here. I mean, the bottom line in it is, there's 15% of all the kids in Ireland are living in poverty. That needs to be broken.
That's not a nice figure. And the other thing, in relation to child benefit, do you believe there should be a cut-off point? When I say cut-off point, legally we're not allowed to abolish it, or we're not allowed to take it away from people because it's in the Constitution. But do you believe that it should be reduced? Say, should Michael O'Leary or Dennis O'Brien or these people, should they be getting child benefit? Because they are currently, I imagine,
I mean, I know Michael O'Leary gave out about me once.
Right.
I remember hearing I saw him on TV and he couldn't remember my name, but it was quite clear who he was talking about, but giving out about me. But in actual fact, Michael O'Leary pays his taxes in Ireland, and I have the greatest respect for him, because he could just as well opt out the same way as others like like Dennis O'Brien or JP.
But didn't he offer to give back the child benefit at one stage? Do you remember he offered?
He did. But like, okay, he was saying he didn't need it. But the bottom line for me is there's an awful lot of households where they depend a bit on that, and it makes a difference. It comes in keeping technically it's a payment for the child, it's not for the adults, but in actual fact, obviously, it contributes to the budget of the household. But the idea, like if we were to give an increase of €50 a month in child benefit to every child in the country, that would cost 740 million. I would say that's 740 million well spent in actual fact.
And it does go back into the economy. I know that it's just a money grant anyway. But you wouldn't be in favour of means testing, because I'm going to be asking my listeners in a few minutes. Would they be in favour of means testing child benefit?
The thing about about means testing, once you start getting into means testing, you're going up a blind alley, because what happens in effect is you get more and more and more resources put into means testing people. I think it's better to think in terms of let's put a floor under everybody. It doesn't have to be a high floor, but a floor enough to ensure that they can live life with basic dignity. If you can put that into place, have that as the target, get that into place, we can collect the tax to do it. We're a rich country now, but we are also a costly country. Like we're the costliest country in Ireland. In Europe. Now, like the average cost of living in Ireland is 145% of the European average. That's the highest in any country in the European Union. There's something wrong with that. We need to be tackling that head on and be able to deal with it. There's one other thing.
I think what most people are struggling with at the moment in this country, Sean, is just the cost of living, the cost of energy, the cost of buying a loaf of bread, the kind of buying a bottle of milk.
Everything, even the price of a pint went up again today.
Even my nuggets in Burger King went up. When I tell you, during the year, I was swear to God, I went into a garage and I noticed they'd gone up by 50 cents. They were normally $4.50 and there were $5. And I said to the guy, where did they put them up? And he said, last week. I said, why did they put them up? He said, I think it's to do with the war in the Ukraine. I said, you're having a laugh. I said, it's nothing to do with the war in the Ukraine.
I know. There's another group, though, that should also be looked after in the budget that aren't looked after properly. They're looked after a bit, and that's carers.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, carers provide a huge service to this state.
They're saving the state a fortune.
A fortune, precisely.
Yeah,
absolutely a fortune. And you're talking about caring for children, caring for older people, caring for people who are ill, caring for people with disability, and like all of those, and that so many of them are doing it, not getting anything or next to nothing for it. We would suggest, in the long run, you need some kind of a basic payment that goes to them, a universal basic payment that goes to people in that space, and obviously combine it the same way as I did earlier on when I was talking a universal basic income with the universal basic services, because people, carers need services in that space, and I think we need to do a lot more in that area than we're actually doing at the moment. The Carers Association of Ireland does a great job, like in trying to look after carers and trying to represent carers and stuff, and they have made gains in recent years, but I think it's time they got a serious gain in a budget. And what I would see as a serious gain would be in the next budget, pilot universal basic income in the same way that they're currently piloting a universal basic income for artists, which they started last year.
That's right.
I mean, that's a very good idea.
No,
it is. Most artists are almost. No artists are making serious big money, so. Okay, put it in that space. Likewise, most carers are
struggling.
They're always struggling, because of just the fact that they're in that caring space.
Yeah.
So I think let's pilot a universal basic income for them as well.
Okay.
And bring it in the budget just to pilot it, and we'd see where it goes.
Well, listen, it's been very interesting talking to you, and I think we probably agree on most things, with the exception of maybe one or two little bits. We could adjust a few figures here and there. Maybe me and you should run in government. Maybe me and you, Sean, we should be in government. We could
We'd be doing well now. I think the country would be doing well if we were.
Absolutely.
But anyway, but it's not an ambition of mine, I can tell you.
Absolutely.
No problem at all.
Sean,
I keep advising the government. But anyway.
Thank you very much indeed, and I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me on the programme. More than happy. Thanks, Niall.
There you go. Dr. Sean Healy, the CEO of Social Justice Ireland.
Real people, real opinions.
Real Talk Radio, the multi-award winning Niall Boylan Show.